The oranges were still warm when I picked them, sun-ripe and glowing. Just like the ones I used to peel in slow spirals when Dorian was little. He liked watching the skin come off in one long ribbon. I used to save the last piece for him, every time. I don't know why I thought he might remember that. Maybe because part of me still believed that memory could outlast ambition. I wrapped the fruit in a soft linen cloth, the one with the frayed edge, folded it into a paper bag, and walked. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not my sister. Not the neighbor who always asked about my son. I just got on the bus and rode until the street signs began sounding like someone else's dream. When the gates of the estate buzzed open, I hesitated. The security camera blinked once like an eye deciding whether I was worth watching. I stepped through anyway. The driveway curved wide like a hotel entrance, lined with sculpted hedges and a fountain taller than the house I live in. My knees ached with each step, but I kept going. The bag of oranges grew heavier the closer I got. I told myself this wasn't about confrontation or surprise. It was just a hello, just a mother bringing fruit to her son. The doorbell echoed like a question. It took a moment. Then the door opened, polished walnut, smooth brass handle, and behind it, a version of Dorian I didn't recognize. He looked taller, leaner. His jaw was sharper. His suit molded to him like second skin. He wore confidence like armor. But it wasn't the new haircut or the designer shoes that stopped me. It was his eyes. They flicked over me, registered something, and froze. Elora. He said, not Mom, just my name. And then, lower, tighter, urgent. You shouldn't be here. My fingers tightened around the bag. I opened my mouth, just to say hello, but his body shifted to block the door. Not now. He said, not like this. He didn't step aside. He didn't reach for the oranges. He looked behind him, then back at me. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't alone. Voices carried from inside. Laughter. Footsteps. Glasses clinking. He leaned in close and said it again. Harsher this time. You can't be here. And before I could ask why, he started to close the door. I didn't walk away. Not right away. When the door clicked shut, I backed down the steps with the weight of the oranges still pressing against my arm. There was a side path, half hidden behind trimmed hedges, and I followed it without thinking. It curved along the house until I found myself standing beside a stone column just wide enough to shield me from view. From there, I could see through the tall living room windows, glass so clean it barely looked real. Inside, the space glowed with warm light. A backdrop had been set up with a logo I didn't recognize. There were chairs lined in neat rows. A catering table. Someone adjusting a boom mic. Dorian stood near the fireplace, talking with two women in crisp suits. Then she walked in. The woman was older than me by a few years. Maybe. Pale hair curled at the shoulders. Pearls catching the light. A soft cream sweater that clung like it was chosen for sympathy. She moved with practiced grace. The kind that comes from knowing you're being watched. Dorian reached for her hand and turned to the group gathering around them. Everyone, he said, smiling that smile he didn't get from me. I'd like you to meet my mother. My stomach clenched so fast I had to grip the column. She nodded sweetly. One of the reporters leaned in. You must be so proud. She blinked, like she'd practiced this answer in the mirror. Every day, he's overcome so much. Dorian laughed and launched into his story. How he'd grown up in and out of shelters. How he never had a real home until he built one. How his mother, Judith, he called her, never gave up on him even after the courts took him away. He paused then, looked right into the cameras. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. The bag slipped from my hand. It hit the pavement with a thud, and the oranges rolled out like marbles on a tilted board. One cracked open at my feet. The juice bled across the concrete, sticky and sweet. He never looked over. He didn't say my name, not once, not even in passing. As the cameras flashed and Judith dabbed the corners of her eyes with a tissue, I stepped back behind the hedge. I gathered what I could of the fruit, but left the torn bag where it lay. I didn't belong in that house. And now, I knew I didn't belong in his story either. I didn't cry on the bus ride home, not when the driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror, not when the paper bag, now half empty, slumped at my feet with orange juice soaking through the bottom. I stared out the window, watching the world blur by families walking dogs, teens on bikes, grocery carts wobbling unevenly across sidewalks. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone belonged somewhere. By the time I got home, the sun had dropped behind the roofline, and my house sat in the quiet like it always did. I locked the door behind me, set the ruined bag on the counter, and stood for a long time in the middle of the kitchen. Then I went to the bedroom, knelt beside the dresser, and pulled out the tin box. It was a rusted old thing that once held shortbread cookies from a hospital gift shop. I'd kept it for years, not for the cookies, but because it was small and solid and safe. I unlatched the lid. Inside were the pieces I thought would always tether him to me. A folded crayon drawing from kindergarten, 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. One was labeled me, the other, Mom. A photo of us from his 10th birthday. He was grinning, gap-toothed, with cake on his cheek. I had forgotten how small he once was, how easy it was to lift him. Report cards, awards from middle school, a card from church camp, and at the very bottom, a letter. He'd written it at 15, folded it 4 times, and left it on my pillow after a fight. "You're my root," it said, "even when I hate the world. You're the reason I don't fall apart." My hands trembled as I read it again, not from age, but from recognition. That boy, the one who scribbled love in sloppy ink, who sat beside me in ER waiting rooms when pneumonia kept him coughing through the night, that boy once believed I was his anchor. And now, he had buried that truth beneath a cleaner, more profitable version. Not because I embarrassed him, but because I didn't fit the story. He didn't erase me out of shame. He erased me because it made everything easier. I laid the letter down gently and closed the lid. There was no use holding on to something if I was the only one who remembered it. But if he could rewrite the truth, so could I. Just not with fiction. I would start with proof. I found Micah Voigt's name from a handwritten card tacked to a bulletin board at the community center. Discreet, experienced, fair. It wasn't much, but I didn't need much, just someone who knew how to look without being seen. He met me at a diner off the interstate, ordered coffee black, and listened without interrupting. When I slid the folded photo across the table, Dorian's press event. Judith beside him, he studied it with the calm focus of someone used to sorting truth from packaging. "Give me 2 weeks," he said. It took him 12 days. He returned with a manila envelope, his name typed neatly on the corner. No grand pronouncements, no dramatic tone, just the facts. Judith Renly, born Judith Alcott, changed her name 3 times. No record of children, no adoption filings, no foster history. Several minor acting credits from a decade ago. Bankruptcy twice. Lived in a trailer park in Arizona before vanishing from records 4 years ago. She wasn't a mother. She was an actress between roles. I thanked Micah and paid him from the small emergency fund I'd kept tucked away since before Dorian's success. Then I made one more call. Judith agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near the edge of town. She arrived wrapped in a shawl, oversized sunglasses clutched in her hand, and sat across from me with the grace of someone still half in character. We didn't order food, just tea. I thought you'd be angrier, she said. Not meeting my eyes. I was. I said, now I'm tired. She looked older than on camera. Her hands trembled when she stirred the sugar. He told me his mother died, she said softly. He said there was no one left, that he needed someone to stand beside him for a foundation launch. Just one event. But it grew. I waited. I lost a son, she added, after a pause. Long ago, I thought, maybe, just for a moment, I could pretend I still mattered to someone. I nodded. Slowly. You didn't replace me, I said. You impersonated grief. That's not the same. Judith's shoulders sagged. She looked down at her tea like it might apologize for both of us. I didn't want to hurt anyone, she whispered. Neither did I. When we stood to leave, she reached for my hand, then thought better of it. We parted with nothing resolved, but no hatred between us. Just two women who had been edited out of someone else's story, each carrying different pages. That night, I opened the tin box again, not for memories, but for evidence. I didn't sleep much after meeting Judith, not because of rage or betrayal. I'd already moved through those, but because something deeper had settled in, a kind of quiet resolve that didn't shake or shout. In the morning, I cleared the kitchen table and laid out the contents of the tin box like I was setting a table for memory. I smoothed the letter Dorian wrote when he was 15. The edges were soft from handling, the ink faded but legible. I unfolded his kindergarten drawing, snapped a photo of the backside where I'd written the date in pencil. Then came the harder pieces, hospital discharge forms with my signature, proof of school fees I'd paid in installments, even the grainy photo of me standing in front of his college dorm with a care package tucked under my arm. I used an old digital camera, nothing fancy, and took each picture in natural light. Without filters or cropping, I wanted them to look exactly like what they were quiet. Undeniable pieces of a life no one had asked to see. Next came the letter, not to him, to them. I addressed each envelope by hand to the corporations, the charities, the publicists, the board members who had smiled beside him at fundraisers built on the image of motherless resilience. The note was short. No anger, no accusation. Just a single line typed beneath my name. If your brand is built on a mother's death, you should know she's alive. I included a few printed photographs, careful not to overload truth. When handled right, doesn't need shouting. The post office clerk glanced at the stack and asked if it was for a family reunion. I said yes. In a way, it was. The kind where someone finally shows up and says what no one else would. Back home, I sat at the table and stared at the empty box. For years, it had held everything I couldn't say. Now that silence was out in the world, stitched into envelopes and moving through mail rooms. I didn't expect headlines. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to exist again in the places I'd been erased from. I watered the orange tree in the yard that afternoon. Its roots had thickened since the day I planted it. Growth doesn't always announce itself. That night, I went to bed without setting an alarm. I had done what I could. And somewhere, the truth was moving. It started with a message from a name I didn't recognize. A short email with no greeting. Just a link. I almost didn't click it. But something about the subject line, "Is this you pulled me in?" The video was only 20 seconds long. Just enough to show me standing at the top of Dorian's steps, bag of oranges in my arms. Just enough to capture the moment his hand hit my shoulder and sent me backward. The way the fruit spilled, the stumble, the stillness. The footage came from a doorbell camera across the street. A neighbor I never met. No dramatic music. No slow motion. Just the raw sound of the door slamming. The thud of my fall. And silence. By the next morning, the video had over 3 million views. By the end of the week, it had been dissected on every morning show, podcast, and social feed. They called me the forgotten mother. They called him a fraud wrapped in a press release. Judith vanished first. No trace. No statement. Dorian's companies began issuing bland apologies, distancing themselves, pausing campaigns out of respect for ongoing conversations about truth and representation. I stayed home, didn't answer reporters, didn't pick up when old co-workers called to say they saw me on the news. Instead, I planted, turned the soil in the back garden and spread seeds in long rows. The rhythm helped. Dig, drop, cover, press. Every once in a while, I'd glance at the orange tree, still growing steady along the fence line, and wonder if it remembered the day it began. If trees feel where pain starts, or only where light reaches. A journalist camped outside for a full afternoon. Another slipped a business card under my doormat. A woman in a white car tried to hand me a gift basket as I walked to the mailbox. I didn't stop. Justice was not what I asked for. I had only asked to be seen. But now it came, roaring and uninvited, shattering the mask he had worn for so long. People reposted the video with captions like, "Mothers don't lie. Oranges don't either." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some truths, once released, don't require your defense. They move on their own. And some reckonings don't call your name, they just arrive. So when the phone rang in the dark and I saw his number glowing on the screen, I already knew what came next. The call came at 3:07 a.m. I was already awake, at my age. Sleep comes like a skittish visitor arrives late, leaves early, and never stays without asking questions first. The number was familiar. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to stop ringing. It didn't. I answered without speaking. "Mom." His voice cracked on the word. Not the smooth tone he used on stages. Not the polished pitch for investors. Just a boy. Worn thin. "I know it's late." He said. I didn't know who else to call. I said nothing. "They're digging through everything." He continued. "The board's pulling out. The press is circling. Sponsors froze accounts." Silence. I need to pay some damages, or they'll seize what's left." Then quieter, like shame curling into the edges of his breath. "Mom, they said you have land, that you have money." There it was. Not apology, not regret, just need. I stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the tree. Its leaves shifted in the wind. Silver on one side, dark on the other. I remembered the night I picked the seed from the pavement. One orange had rolled to the curb. Still whole? I brought it home, split it open, saved the seed, planted it with nothing but bruised hands and a whisper of hope. He kept talking about second chances, about how he'd fix things, how he'd bring me into the company, how we could rebuild the story together. Then he used the word he hadn't said since he was a teenager. "Mother." I let it hang there between us. "You remember that day," I said, my voice calm, "when I came to your door with oranges?" He was quiet. "When you pushed me. When you looked through me like I was something dead you forgot to bury. A shallow breath on the other end. That day, when you closed your door to your mother. Only one other door opened. A pause. The door to hell." He said. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "And I will not open another one for you." I ended the call. No trembling, no second thoughts. Just the soft rustle of leaves outside, and the sound of the world. Finally, going quiet, the next morning. I woke before sunrise, brewed a cup of tea, and sat in the garden alone, intact, and finally free to choose what grew next. It's been 2 years since the phone call. 2 years since I said no and meant it. Since I stopped waiting for something to return that had long since left. I live quietly now. Mornings begin with tea and a short walk around the garden. I volunteer twice a week at the community center down the street. helping with the lunch program. They call me Miss Elora, or sometimes Granny E. Though none of them know the story behind the name, the orange tree casts a long shadow across my kitchen window in the afternoon. It's taller than the fence now, the branches strong and wide. Some seasons, it bears more fruit than I can carry. I leave little baskets on neighbors' porches, always with a note that says nothing but picked this morning. It's enough. Next door, a little girl named Sylvie visits often. She has wild curls and a bicycle with a pink ribbon on the handlebar. She comes over after school with crayon drawings and questions about birds or cloud shapes. Her laugh reminds me of something I used to know and forgot to mourn one day. While peeling an orange on the porch, she sat beside me and asked, "I wish you were my real grandma." Can I pretend I smiled and nodded? Of course. She leaned her head against my arm while I handed her a slice. Juice ran down her chin, and I wiped it gently with the edge of my sleeve. I never told her about Dorian. I never told anyone. That story belongs to the soil now buried under the roots of something far more honest. There's a kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It settles in the corners of the house, in the way the garden gate creaks or the kettle whistles. I don't need to be remembered by the world. I just need to live in a way that makes forgetting impossible to those who matter. Sylvie brought me a drawing last week. Me, her, and the orange tree. She labeled it home. That night, I clipped the picture to the fridge and stood for a long time looking at it. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. The next morning, I placed 3 ripe oranges on the windowsill and opened the back door wide, just in case someone needed to find their way in. And I kept the 4th for planting.